Look, let's talk Knicks.
Yeah.
The RJ Barrett stuff that was floating around already. They signed him to an extension when I guess it seemed like an offer was close and Utah backed out. What do you make? Are you prepared to defend the Knicks here the way that I am?
Well, partially. So from here, it seems like I think it's probably objectively the right decision for the Knicks specifically to not give up the kind of draft equity that Cleveland did. Because like you said it like early on, the Knicks just the Knicks just aren't in a position to sacrifice their future first round picks. They're not. The upside isn't there. It's not like they have a Garland and a Mobley and an Allen to like insulate them through organic growth from those picks potentially being super valuable. And we're talking unprotected again. And so like it just takes one disaster and you've given up the number one pick potentially. So I think that's the right decision. What makes strange for me is that, and this is a little bit like what we discussed and what a lot of people discussed with the Brunson situation, is it's like it doesn't seem to fit into a bigger vision that of what this team wants to do, because they kind of, they acquired a bunch of picks on draft. They got all this, they made a bunch of moves and it felt like kind of just shuffling deck chairs, but they emerged with more draft equity to use for something. Like maybe it was going to be the Mitchell trade. I think, it was very reasonable to think Mitchell was going to be on the Knicks. I think everyone expected that. And now he's not. And so now what was that all for? It's just a lack of like a bigger cohesive picture, which I know is your big gripe with the team. So sorry if I stepped on it, but it's complicated for the Knicks. They shouldn't have given up what it took to get Mitchell, but since they didn't, like, what's the plan?
Yeah. So, very quickly towards the Russell Westbrook stuff, something we didn't mention, and I just realized it's probably just very unlikely because now the Jazz are hard capped after acquiring Sexton in the sign and trade. Just a wrinkle there. So I'm pretty much with you on all you said. I don't think it makes what they did this offseason needless. We went through, if you go back to the Knicks report card, where we were fairly critical. Their mode of, like, when you look at everything in sum, they didn't do anything detrimental. And if you have all these picks stashed in the deck, you're still ready to go out and get another star. My biggest gripe with them is still, I don't think they should have done all this just to sign Jalen Brunson because they're not at that level. I'd rather be bad, be gradual. And they were very much still trying to skip a step. I still don't necessarily agree with like that mindset. And this is the danger of that, because everyone knows how, in theory, because they clearly weren't, how desperate you are to get Donovan Mitchell or that star since you did all this. But I also don't think, and I just discussed this on the Knicks Film School podcast Wednesday or whatever day it was, I don't think the Knicks thought Donovan Mitchell was going to become available this summer. Otherwise, I would expect Jalen Brunson not to be part of the plan, although I guess his ties, like familial ties to the organization, trounce that a little bit. But like, you shouldn't have been matching this offer, because the Cavs we just talked about are a threat in the East, where you can, let's like even just keep it basic and generalized. Their path to being a top 4 team in the East and more than that is exceedingly clear. If you trade for Donovan Mitchell and you're the Knicks, that path with the roster that would have been left over is not only blurry at best, but if you matched this package, you have nothing left to go out and get that next star. You would need RJ Barrett to develop into the type of centerpiece that could net you a star on his own, in which case, why are you trading RJ Barrett at that point? And so there's a certain ambiguity to what the Knicks would have been with Mitchell, even if they got him like affordably. Like if you looked at it and said, oh, they only gave up 2 or 3 unprotected firsts and Obi Toppin and then a crappier 2 firsts where they still had stuff left over. Like there still would have been an issue there. But if you matched this, which is essentially, look, it's the control of 6 draft picks when you factor in Akbaji, that just would have been mega difficult to then go out and make another splashy transaction. And so we can make fun of them for acquiring those picks, only not to use them. But the idea behind those picks, aside from maybe wanting a first in the chamber in case you get docked one for tampering with Jalen Brunson, is you wanted to have picks for 2 stars, basically, for 2 really big trades. And you removed yourself from the table by extending RJ Barrett. I still just don't believe, if Utah wanted Barrett, I just firmly believe it was they thought they were going to get multiple first-round picks to flip him. I don't think they wanted to deal with his next contract. I think his contract now, 4 years, $107 million guaranteed, is fine, but like that's still a pretty steep increase from Sexton. So I'm totally fine that they walked away from the table here. If you want to take issue, because the way I look at it as, if you liked the Jalen Brunson trade, like signing, you shouldn't hate it now because they didn't get Donovan Mitchell. I don't think that was something that was done with the hope of getting a Mitchell. And if you didn't like the Jalen Brunson trade signing, like, Mitchell might have made you like it a little bit more, or maybe a little bit less, depending on how you feel about that backcourt. But you're not going to feel any differently now. The thing to actually criticize the Knicks for would be if, like, them chaining themselves to this sub-mediocre trajectory in the East right now. And they still have the assets to change that, but I don't think just because you don't have a clear path to being better than okay, that you need to then give up everything for Donovan Mitchell, who, frankly, I think is an incredibly good player. Based on the interactions I've had with fans from other teams throughout this, he is underrated for what he does offensively. But is he an all-NBA talent? Like, caliber, yes. Can you guarantee he's going to be all NBA bound or like an all NBA contender year in and year out? No, he's not. He's probably like top 20, maybe a little bit outside that. And so you don't go into this like if you look back, the Carmelo Anthony trade package was, like, in the end, not an absurd amount, but, like, in real time, knowing what they had offered and for James Dolan to come in and them up it, you can't, like, criticize the Knicks for giving up and too much and losing in trades and then criticize them for being too conservative. Feel free to criticize them for not being creative enough or just inspirational with their trajectory by going out and getting Brunson at a time where it kind of would have made more sense to continue along the gradual route and be bad.
Yeah, I think from the Knicks side of this, a couple things, like, just distinguish this from the Cleveland situation. The first is, as you mentioned, with respect to Cleveland, if you're getting Donovan Mitchell, you better be pretty confident that he's not going to be your best player going forward. And for the Knicks, I think he clearly would have been the team's best player, and getting him at anything close to this price would have foreclosed on a lot of opportunities to go get that guy, because you're out a bunch of picks, you're spending a ton of money, you're probably hoping you re-sign him at a giant max level, and so now you're like, he's it. He is going to be the be all end all for your franchise for a very long time. And, like, maybe he has that level in him. I think we both agree that he probably doesn't. But just the fact that it narrows so severely that the Knicks, hypothetically, their avenues towards being as good as, say, the Cavs might be, like, even just this year, then the price was just too high. It took away way too many options for a team that, like, I mean, I don't know. I just think, like, the Knicks would not have made as much sense just on the floor this year either, because you don't have the Allen Mobley sort of, safety net back there because Mitchell and
just to get out in front of this, because I've seen certain Knicks fans like to compare Mitchell Robinson from everyone to Rudy Gobert, to Robert Williams, to Jared Allen. That dude is one of the least dynamic offensive players in the league. And so it's not Allen, it's not Mobley, it's not Gobert, it's not Robert Williams. He's not it. I don't mean to say it. I apologize there.
Well, and just defensively too, he's not on Gobert's level. Like, almost nobody is. We're talking about Robinson, and like, I like Mobley way better, like, today as a defender than Robinson, let alone, like, what he's going to potentially become. So yeah, I think I'm with you. It kind of sucks for Knicks fans, because, like, you maybe thought you were going to get Donovan Mitchell and now you aren't. But it's one of those things where it's probably for the best, assuming they put those picks that didn't get traded to use, that they, kind of build sensibly going forward and start to show more of a plan. But yeah, I think we would have been negative, I think, pretty down on the Knicks side of this if they'd given up a similar package.
It just would have been failing them, just outperforming expectations. I do think what this does kind of say, though, is you can say, oh, star X is not going to get this. Did it with Rudy Gobert. Did it with Donovan Mitchell. This is now the star trade market. And so if you are the Knicks, the idea of trading for two stars does become a little implausible in general. And it makes it that much more important that RJ Barrett was already as of right now, was already the most important player in that building to them. And now he's even more important, because you don't make a trade like this unless you have him. And the Cavs had more than someone on RJ Barrett's level. They had like three guys who are ready to win now, all-star level players. You have to sort of recalibrate now and see, is really going after two stars via trade even feasible. If you think there's going to be a free agency renaissance, then maybe it's different with the cap going up and the way we know certain players can't extend. So you could view it that way, but it makes it that much more important to get the star in place, either free agency or through the draft or development in RJ Barrett, and to know you have him and make that move later. Making this move first makes it that much harder to acquire the second or third guy, however you're trying to figure it. And I do think that's maybe an outcome that they didn't necessarily foresee to all of this.
Yeah, I think the big picture implications of this are really interesting in terms of like, is there going to be a market correction where, you know, because up until recently, it didn't take you 5 first rounders, including swaps, to get a good player, to get an all-star. And you've got the Murray trade and you've got Gobert, and now you've got this one. I guess you could go back to Drew Holiday, but that was a unique set of circumstances where, like, is that going to continue? Or, and I guess I'll answer my own question. I think probably that's going to be how it is, because I don't feel like we're going to see Cleveland and Minnesota find themselves totally screwed if this goes bad, because one has Anthony Edwards and one has Evan Mobley.
And Garland.
So, like, I think if there were if the Knicks had done this and it had gone bad, I think maybe what you would have seen is a return to a priority on free agency for talent acquisition versus giving up a bunch of picks. Because if that goes bad, the floor is a low. For the two teams most recently that have made big trades with Utah and given up all these picks, the floor is kind of high just because you've got talent that's there that's ready to keep the team at least decent and interesting if these trades don't work. So we're going to see the market change, but it might not happen like for 3 or 4 years, because these two test cases I don't think are going to change much.
Yeah, my final thought on the Knicks is I thought if they didn't get Donovan Mitchell, that then you should immediately pivot into trying to get Russell Westbrook. I just can't. The more I think about it, I can't envision them even getting one of the Lakers first for Fournier and Randall type package. Like Rose, there's the expiring there. Lance in the chat says Cavs are now a top what team in the league. We already discussed this, but we probably have them as like a top 10 team next year. Or I mean, the West is deep. It's top 12. Like they're going to be a top 6 team in the East, I think. So let's just say top 12.
Yeah. I think they have a chance to finish like second or third potentially. But you know, I feel like something has gone very wrong if they're worse than if they're in the play-in. I think they should be clear of the play-in, which is kind of a big deal. I mean, that matters now.
Yeah, no, that is a big deal. And so I don't know necessarily where the Knicks go from here, but I think I am impressed that they drew a line in the sand. And kind of the way negotiations were going, you might have expected that. I really thought, given the way the RJ stuff was reported, they were going to end up giving a bunch of picks and pull we really wanted to keep RJ, and this is what it took to keep RJ card. So I was wrong on that framing, or maybe they planned to do it and just got outbid. But if you're a Knicks fan, yeah, it's fine to be disappointed that you didn't get Donovan Mitchell. I ultimately think if this was the going rate, it makes sense for the Cavs to pay it. It does not make sense for the Knicks to have paid it. I know you need to get out of here. Is there anything that you would like to add, though?
No, that totally. I think that sums it up great. Like, this isn't an objectively good trade. It's a good trade for the Cavs with what they had and what they paid in this particular set of circumstances. And I think we should probably look at trades generally more that way. Just like we have to look at the contracts differently, like RJ in the image of the cap going up. Like, we have to now recalibrate what the superstar market is.